As expected, people with not the highest critical thinking skills, they wasted no time to flood my previous Avowed video's comments and call me out for things that I wasn't even talking about. My video was clearly a rebuttal to the anti-woke crowd and all of the nonsensical conversations that kind of dominated the early access and launch week. Things like pronouns in the character creator, or neon blue hair and lipstick and weird fungus. Even things like the dialogue throughout the game and so much more. Just everything you'd expect from that crowd at this point. So ultimately, you all did a great job, or at least the people who commented and did the things I'm talking about. You did a great job proving my point around the discourse of Avowed and just gaming as a whole. It's dinguses parroting dingus opinions from their favorite grifter creators. It's all nonsense. It's all a waste of time. It's all worthless. Give this game a month or so, and I am fairly confident that you people will have moved on. Maybe Assassin's Creed Shadows, you'll go grift and be annoying to the fans of that game, and then this game will be looked back on as pretty damn good. Not perfect. Again, it has flaws. We're going to get into it, but it's not an awful game like you all think it is. But yeah, some good points were brought up, and I think it falls into two main categories: unrealistic and frankly stupid expectations for the game, and price. In general, most conversations about video games are quite subjective. There's some things you can look at relatively objectively, but it still comes down to personal preference. We can play the exact same game with the same dialogue, NPCs, graphics, story, exploration, upgrade systems, gear loot, etc., and we can come away with polar opposite opinions. On the surface, it's fair. It's pretty expected. But you got to go a little bit deeper and talk about things with some nuance, because a lot of these opinions are silly. A lot of them are misguided. They lack the critical thinking and nuance that I think we all need to have. The honesty. If we want things to improve, everyone complains about AAA being so down, then we need this honesty, this nuance, this critical thinking. We just need to have those conversations properly. We can't just shriek stupid things that stupid creators have told you to shriek about. So the first main topic let's get into is expectations. Seeing a lot of combos and comments directly comparing this to Skyrim. I was even one of them where I compared the combat, right? And even Witcher 3. And look, I get it. Those games are fantastic. They are fantasy RPGs at their core. Avowed is a fantasy RPG. They're semi-similar. And because those games are better, and pretty old at this point, that therefore makes Avowed garbage. Aggressive air quotes here. Because that's a silly thing to think about, right? That's a nonsense argument. Are we sure that we've all played and experienced all of these games properly? There's really no proper way to play a game. That's, again, subjective. But can we relax and think about the type of games these are? Because yes, they are fantasy RPGs. There's swords, there's magic. Especially with Skyrim, you can switch between first and third person, just like Avowed. But that's kind of where the differences end. They're fundamentally different experiences. Some focus more on story, some focus more on being a sandbox, like Skyrim does, and then some focus on exploration, world building, and lore. I simply don't think it's fair to make the argument that Avowed was supposed to be the Skyrim killer. So if your expectations were that Avowed was going to be the next Skyrim, that's kind of on you. Is it as deep and immersive as Skyrim? No. Skyrim is a sandbox RPG. Obsidian doesn't make those. Was it ever trying to be the next Skyrim? No. I watched all the trailers. That's not the expectation they set. Was the budget there to create a sandbox fantasy RPG as big as Skyrim to begin with? No. Obviously not. Obsidian may be considered AAA from an employee count. About 300 employees depending on where you look on Google, but they've got Outer Worlds 2 coming out. It's fair to say at least half of their workforce is focused on that, because it's a sequel to a successful IP. And then this is more of an experimental new IP. It's not fully new world, right? It's Pillars of Eternity, but it's a new IP. It's a new style. They're not going to throw their full budget, full workforce at it. It's more of a AA game from that perspective. Obviously, that runs into issues with the price, and we'll get into that in a minute, so I promise I'll cover it. But from a AA perspective, I just don't think it's fair to assume that this game was supposed to be the next Skyrim. So maybe we should judge this game based on what we got, not what we didn't get, and not based on what you've all made up in your mind it was supposed to be, despite no real indication of that being realistic in any way, shape, or form. We should be looking at what is there, and if that properly adds up to a full experience that you as a player individually will enjoy and think is worth buying at the price point that it's at, not thinking of what's missing and if that should make you angry. Finding reasons to get riled up about it, finding reasons for why they should dislike the game and bash it on social media. It's very interesting. It's very odd to me. So yeah, I get it. Skyrim, as a direct comparison, is a better game in a lot of ways, but it's also a very different game. It's a sandbox RPG. That is not what Obsidian's doing here. I know people use Skyrim as a comparable, and even I did, like I mentioned earlier, but it was within the realm of combat. I said something to the effect of, if you like Skyrim, then you'll like this game. It has similar combat with swords and magic. because it does. Go first-person Skyrim, go first-person Avowed. There are some obvious similarities there in that moment-to-moment combat. And while we're at it, if you want to make that comparison, let's be realistic here. Avowed is an improvement over the combat in Skyrim. It just is. There's more spells, they're cooler, combat is weightier. I know it might not come off on video. There's weight when you actually make contact with an opponent with a weapon, so maybe that comes off a little bit weird when you watch gameplay of it, but when you're actually playing, it feels good. I don't know what else to say about it. It just does, and I think most people, if you put Skyrim on one monitor and Avowed on another monitor and play them back and forth, I think you'll pick Avowed 9 times out of 10 as far as the feel of the combat. With all that said, I'm not really sure why you're not allowed to enjoy both and understand that they're different and they can be enjoyed from different perspectives and you can have fun with both of them. Do you want the more deeper and immersive experience to play for 8 hours on your Sunday before work or school the next morning? Yeah, dive into Skyrim. It's still a very fun game. Plus, there's so many mods that you can dive into to make it a new experience, even though it's so old. You want a more streamlined arcadey experience? Play Avowed. That's an option. You can enjoy both. It's okay to like things if they're not perfect. It's okay to like things that aren't a massive industry pushing experience, you know? It just, we can't adopt the mindset that it has to be a 10 out of 10 or it's not worth playing. That is so close-minded and so wrong in so many ways. It's just, that's not how anything progresses forward in society, in any aspect of any industry. You can have things just be good. They do not have to be perfect or fantastic or amazing. They can just be good. And I do want to go deeper into the depth of the game. See what I did there? Bethesda RPGs are deeper. I've said it over and over and over again. Obsidian does have Fallout New Vegas. That is the big one that everyone talks about. That is probably their most famous game. But that is Fallout 3.5. That is a Bethesda game with Bethesda framework that they contracted Obsidian to produce. I know Obsidian made the Fallout universe. They started with Fallout 1 and 2. Workers that made up Obsidian when they were working on Fallout New Vegas were the same workers that were highly responsible for Fallout 1 and 2. I know there's nuance, there's asterisk. All of the systems and all the things that people love about New Vegas, or most of them, are still at their core Bethesda sandbox RPG staples. Obsidian came in and had improved writing, decision-making that changes the story as you progress through various side missions and even unnamed missions and dialogue choices. The memorable NPCs, the dialogue, all of these things. That was Obsidian's touch on a Bethesda framework open world sandbox RPG. So you can't just say, look what Obsidian did with Fallout New Vegas. Why isn't Avowed similar? Because guess what else Obsidian has done? Outer Worlds, which by every metric, Avowed is Outer Worlds crossed with something like Fable. You get the small zones, they're intentional, it's arcadey, it's streamlined, it's tight-knit, but now it's in a fantasy RPG setting. This should not be a surprise at all. It's almost disingenuous to say that Obsidian dropped the ball on these things. You can say they've done better in past games, and I think that's pretty accurate, but they didn't absolutely shit the bed on this one. The aspects that make Obsidian RPGs memorable and good are still here in Avowed. You just didn't actually play the game, or you listened to the opinion of someone who didn't fully play the game, or rushed through it. A lot of reviewers are saying 20 to 30 hours. I'm at 24 hours, and I'm not even done with the second out of 4 main zones. I see a lot of people on their Reddit taking their time, exploring the game, having fun with it, like you're kind of supposed to. Again, there's no correct way to play, but at the same time, these games are jam-packed. You shouldn't sprint through the main campaign and skip everything else. So this is a 70-hour game, 60-hour game. Some people are 80 or 100 hours in one playthrough. Plus, kind of meant to replay. There's different endings. There's at least 5 that they've admitted to, plus nuance and variation within those 5. We'll get into that more with the pricing conversation. So yeah, execution of this game, it's obvious a lot of people just have not played it. If you think they botched it, you're not paying attention, you didn't play it, you're being disingenuous. It's an asinine statement. Just move on. Go complain about Assassin's Creed Shadows. We're tired of it. We're bored. You're boring us. You watched your favorite bigoted creator say some stupid shit about how Skyrim is better and Skyrim's old and therefore this game is trash. You did zero critical thinking, and you're sticking to your guns on that one. And I guess good for you, but that's pathetic. Also, people bringing up physics, forgot to mention. Why do you care? I mean, I get it. Sandbox RPGs, right? Which this is not trying to be, but they do have that. You can pick up plates and kind of throw them 3 feet. I'm not sure why that makes Skyrim a better game or why it's worth complaining about like a child, but that is indeed missing from this game. I don't know. I've never cared about it. I guess if you care about it, it is more immersive. I really don't think that's what they're trying to accomplish here. I will say, hands up, the gear and loot can be underwhelming. That is one aspect of the game where, regardless of if it's sandbox or arcadey, you still want the gear and the upgrade systems and stuff to be deep, and they're not super deep here. And in my heart, I get that. It is not perfect. It is a bit stale. There's lots of exploration, lots of chests, but you find a lot of crafting materials in those chests. That said, when you do find the rare loot, the good item, the unique sword that finally fits your build perfectly, it hits. It hits hard. And that's kind of the point of these rarity systems. If you just find good stuff all the time, then that undermines rarity as a concept. There's a happy medium somewhere. I think they could improve the variety of loot, but I also don't care that much. I still like the fact that I'm parkouring around exploring and I randomly find a little lockbox and it has some more of that rare crafting material that I needed a couple more of. That's fulfilling enough for me, but I understand if it's not for you. And obviously, totally fair. I also think we should acknowledge how similar this is to the launch of Outer Worlds, which, by the way, as I've said, getting a sequel this year. Looking back at now, the game is clearly decent. It's clearly rock solid, 8 out of 10. It was considered underrated at this point. From what I can find online, the launch of Avowed is very similar to the launch of Outer Worlds on Steam. Some people are buying it, 250,000 now at this point, approximately, based on SteamDB, peak around 20K. That's not earth-shattering. Monster Hunter Wilds just came out and peaked 1.4 million or something absurd. We get it. There's levels to it. Avowed is not the best game made this year. It's not even close. But it's a good game. And Game Pass exists. It's very clear that they're pushing people to Game Pass. Again, another point that comes into play with the pricing. And Game Pass is way larger now than it was 3 or so years ago when Outer Worlds came out. It's very easy to say with confidence that the launch of Avowed, if only by a little, it's better than Outer Worlds, and Outer Worlds got DLC and got a sequel. Avowed's getting DLC, and Avowed might get a sequel. So for this game that sucks so bad, what are you talking about? It's clearly found an audience. It's just not you. And you should be able to maturely say, hey, maybe it's not for me. I want something a bit deeper. I'm more of a sandbox Bethesda RPG type person. I'll skip it. You should be able to have that mature take. But no, you tell all of us that are enjoying the game that it fucking sucks and it's not worth playing. That's where a lot of the frustration comes from. So wrapping up this section, if you expected Skyrim, that's on you, champ. That's a you problem, not a me problem, not an us problem. The game did not overpromise and underdeliver. The game did not tell you it was going to be Skyrim. You made that up. You decided that you were not going to think about it for more than 2 seconds. You saw certain large creators compare it to Skyrim and Oblivion, and you shut down, and that's it. And that's just not my problem. Now let's move on to, I think, the actually probably more legitimate concern, price. I touched on it multiple times already, so let's get this out of the way. $70 is probably too much. I get it. 40 to 50 would have been a much more appropriate starting MSRP, and then obviously it will go on sale for the summer sale, probably for holiday sales. Obviously Game Pass is there if you want to just subscribe for a month or two and then cancel that sub, then it's effectively very cheap. I get it. $70 is a lot. But I think the whole pricing conversation is a bit of a slippery slope because there's not a lot of consistency in the logic here with what I think is probably the average opinion that large games demand large price tags, large by number of hours, and then shorter games are smaller price tags. But of course, it doesn't continue going up because a game like GTA Online can give you 1,000 hours, but you're not going to pay $300 for that game, are you? So see how it only works when you think you're not getting enough value, but when you get too much value, all of a sudden that doesn't make any sense. So you gotta fucking relax there. So I get it. I'm an adult. I have adult money. Buying a $70 game isn't the end of the world. But if I'm middle school or high school and I'm playing a bunch of free-to-play games and I'm only gonna buy 1, 2, maybe 3 $70 games the entire year, or even ask for them for holidays or birthday, maybe Avowed is not on that list. And I get that. If you have $70 for Monster Hunter Wilds, $70 for Avowed, a lot of people obviously are choosing Monster Hunter Wilds. I do get that. But then we get into the whole price versus inflation aspect, and I'm not arguing that games should skyrocket. Certain things need to be cheap. The world sucks. Not everything follows inflation. I don't want games to be more expensive. But games started to charge $60 as early as 1983, according to Google. Didn't really become mainline until late 90s, early 2000s, and then it's just stayed there. We're finally starting to see games that cost $70 instead of $60, and people are losing their mind. And I get it. The thing that you like is getting more expensive, and that sucks. And our wages haven't really caught up with inflation, so why should everything else? And not everything goes with inflation to begin with. I want to be on the side of the consumer here. I don't want games to be more expensive, but at the same time, it makes sense that they're going to be eventually, and it's still worth it for the most part because of how incredibly high the value is of that entertainment. You get so many hours of entertainment out of it. Going to a movie, it's like $20 a ticket, $18 a ticket. You buy a $70 game and you can get 30 hours out of it if it's a roguelike or an indie game that has a lot of depth. So it's just, it's weird. Also, in general, we should be able to acknowledge that price to number of hours of content has historically never been a real correlation or causation or anything statistically relevant. The more expensive games have never always, just been the longer games. That's not how that works. There are plenty of full-priced games that theoretically pad out an empty open world with a checklist of shit. Ubisoft is good at it, and it's 250 hours to beat. And there's games that are very streamlined, and they just don't go more than about 20 hours, and they're still worth $60 or $70. It's not a good argument. So yeah, value per dollar of gaming is already so high. I think it's just a bit frustrating when you start nickel and diming the total number of theoretical hours of content. And even if we do want to do that, like I said, you got reviewers saying this game is 25, 30 hours, and then you got me who's 24 hours in, and I'm not even halfway. So obviously, it's just a dumb nonsense argument. I get it. You want the best bang for your buck, especially when your buck is not taking you as far as it used to, because wages aren't keeping up with inflation. I'm not saying this game should be more expensive, because, like I said at the beginning, it should probably be $40 to $50. At the same time, time, I'm loving the game. I would have no personal quarrel with spending 70 on it. And if you want to compare the best games in the world that have been at that high price tier, then you also should probably think about the worst games that have ever come out that also were at the highest price tier. We've got Anthem, we've got Battlefield 2042, we've got Cyberpunk 2077, No Man's Sky, comeback story of a lifetime, right? They're also broken at launch, and Avowed is not broken at launch. It does crash. I've had a handful of crashes, and it is getting pretty annoying, but it is not a objectively broken, shitty made game. It's playable, and it's fun, and you get a lot of hours. Hopefully this all makes sense. Also, one final thing to bring up with the price is obviously Game Pass. It's very clearly a push by Microsoft to drive people to Game Pass subscriptions. I think that that's annoying. Like, fuck you, Microsoft, for doing that, because they should just charge $50, but they're jacking it way up to really artificially push people towards Game Pass. And we'll never really know those numbers unless they voluntarily share them. That's a bit stinky, but that is happening. That is an aspect. I think there's a lot of misplaced frustration with Obsidian specifically. That feels wrong to me. I just don't think the devs deserve all this bullshit when they made a really, really solid game. It's not an amazing game, but it is not a bad game. And to think that they are the ones in charge of pricing is silly. You don't know how a business works. The developers that are doing the design and creating the game do not get to say how much it costs. Like, that is a executive suits. Business owners are the business owners are the business owners that make those decisions, at least traditionally. Obviously, I don't work at Obsidian. I don't work at Microsoft. I'm sure Obsidian are pushing for a certain price, but Microsoft, because they own Obsidian, probably has the final say. I think that's pretty fair. So wrapping it up, look, there's a lot of bad expectations and a lot of nonsense, nothing burger comparisons to games like Skyrim and Witcher 3, which are not fair. They're disingenuous and they're silly. Play the game and see for yourself. There's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and you have to make decisions on your own. Even me. I said this in my last video, I'm saying it now. I'm just a guy giving you information, right? And my opinion. Don't take it at 100% fact. Go play the game. If $70 is too much, going into price, I get it. It is too much. Maybe try Game Pass, maybe wait for a sale, but don't write this game off entirely. If you have any interest whatsoever, it's silly. Yeah, it got way too politicized for no reason. They got bored this month. They couldn't wait for Assassin's Creed Shadows, so they jumped on the hate train for Avowed. Not really sure why. All very silly, all a waste of time. In fact, a lot of you probably didn't even make it to this part of the video. You're not changing your mind anyway. I'm just wasting time, but hopefully some people at least try to open their mind and see things from where I'm seeing them, and which is pretty much the reasonable middle ground take here, where there's more to it. There's more nuance. There's more critical thinking involved. Anyway, if you like the video. Subscribe for more of your second favorite effort. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.